Hey y'all, my name is Sarah Shudik and I currently teach forensic science here at Lubbock Cooper High School. But before I was here, I worked for the Texas Department of Public Safety as a forensic scientist. So I worked in controlled substance analysis, which is a branch of forensic chemistry. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. So if you don't know, Texas Department of Public Safety is the same agency that houses all of the state troopers and the Texas Rangers. So they're basically the state police. They have jurisdiction all over the state. So if a crime happens anywhere in the state, it doesn't matter if the trooper or ranger is from that area, they can still solve that crime. They have like precedence over all other law enforcement. So the forensic scientists are the ones that back up the evidence that they find and present it in court so that we can know whether or not this particular person needs to go to jail or have X consequences. There are 13 DPS crime labs in the state of Texas. The closest one is actually here in Lubbock. So I worked at the Lubbock lab for just a few months, and then I left to go and work at the Midland lab, which you'll see there in pink. So in the Midland lab, I was working with controlled substances, so seized drugs, and I also did blood alcohol content. So when you're working with controlled substances, it's pretty dangerous. You generally receive drugs that are taken from people with serious problems or people who have put themselves or others in danger because they have ingested some kind of substance or another. So when police find, say, an unknown white powder in someone's car, they bring that powder to me, and just using chemistry, I have to figure out what it is. Out of all of the white powders in the entire world, what is this specific powder? What is in there? What's the elemental makeup of this specific substance? So that's what I spent all my time doing. And in order to do that, you have to have a really good foundation in chemistry. You have to like science. You have to be able to follow procedures and be very meticulous and specific about what you're doing. You have to be thorough. So a lot of the things that y'all are studying in chemistry class, they're gonna apply here. One of those things is that you have to know the chemical formula and structure of anything that might pass through the lab. So for example, here's the formula and structure of cocaine. So if I have to testify in court saying this white powder is cocaine, I need to be able to tell the judge, the jury, the lawyers, and everyone exactly what it looks like and what it's made of. Another big part of being a forensic chemist or a seized drug analyst, whatever you want to call it, is that you have to know how the tests work. So to know how the tests work, you have to know everything about the drug itself. So one of my specializations at the lab was marijuana. So I have to know how it's grown. I had to study how to grow marijuana. I have to know what it looks like, the chemical formula, its physical structure and appearance, where it's most commonly found. I have to know how much it sells for in different parts of the state, all sorts of things. So let's talk a little bit about the chemistry there, so you can see what some of these tests look like that you have to do in an actual forensic science lab. So you may have learned in chemistry class that color change is one of the signatures of a chemical reaction. So when we're testing for drugs, it's no different. So for marijuana, I know it's not on this list, but marijuana is gonna turn like a deep, deep purple color depending on how you're testing. Usually when you're trying to identify a drug, there are multiple tests that you have to perform to confirm that that is the drug that you're looking for. So if you have, 3 or 4 or 5 even different tests all pointing to one substance, you're gonna be way more convincing in court. So this is what marijuana looks like when you test it in liquid. You're looking for this characteristic split of purple. So you'll see like a light purple and then a deep, deep purple there at the top. And that indicates THC, which is the illegal derivative of cannabis. This is the second test you would do for marijuana. So basically you mix it with a liquid, you put a tiny spot at the bottom of what's called a spot plate, and this whole process is called thin layer chromatography. So you set this plate in water, you let the water soak through the chemical that you put at the bottom, and it's gonna travel up this plate as the water absorbs onto the plate itself, and it's gonna separate into its chemicals. So cannabis has several different derivatives, and you can see based on the size of these circles and the color of these circles that the THC is going to be towards the top and it's going to be in red. Now, if the line doesn't make it all the way up to the THC part, then you can't legally charge someone with possession. So I know all of this is a little weird. It's weird to know this much about drugs. But it's kind of fascinating. It's interesting to see like the physical structure of how these elements are arranged produce very specific effects on people. There are uppers and downers and all sorts of stuff. And then you can take a drug and a really powerful microscope. You can look through the microscope and see in 3D what that drug is going to look like. So if your drug is a plant, you're going to have this really vivid picture to go along with all of that chemistry that you've been doing in the lab. It's pretty cool. Check it out. This weird looking thing is what marijuana looks like under a microscope. So this is magnified several hundred times. If you see the balls at the top of these weird looking structures, that's where the THC is held in marijuana. So that's where the illegal substance is. So it has very specific characteristics that not only do we do a chemical analysis of the drug, we do a physical analysis too. After you do all of your tests and you confirm that whatever the substance is, you know, whatever it is, whatever you discover, then you actually have to write a formal lab report. It's gonna look a lot different than what you're doing in your class. It's gonna have a specific format, but a lot of the same elements. You have to take measurements to certain numbers of significant digits. You have to record observations, color changes. You have to word a conclusion in a way that's very clear and concise. And that lab report is what you take into a courtroom. And kind of the final step in the process here is that as a controlled substance analyst, I'm considered an expert witness. So it's my job to go into a courtroom, and I can't testify whether someone is intoxicated or not. The only thing I can testify to is the identification of this unknown substance, because that's the only thing. So a lot of times, like, people hear forensic science and they assume that, oh, you're solving crimes, you're a detective, you know all of these things about the case. Well, with some parts of forensic science, that's true, like DNA analysts, they have to know some background of the case to form their conclusions. But drugs are drugs. Like, if this white powder is cocaine, it's not anything else. So if you work in controlled substances, a lot of times you don't get those details. You don't know under what circumstances that drug was seized. You don't know what's going to happen to the person. We can get a general idea because in Texas, certain drugs are worth a harsher sentence than other drugs. So possession of marijuana is always going to be a misdemeanor, whereas possession of a much harder, much addictive, like a more addictive substance, that's going to be automatic jail time the good majority of the time. So you also have to be familiar with laws and landmark cases and all sorts of stuff. But the chemistry is pretty fun. You get to see a lot of color changes. You get to work with a lot of equipment that's very high tech. You get to go to a lot of trainings. I got to go to training with Drug Enforcement Agency where we got to actually manufacture illegal drugs, and then we had to destroy them. But still, it was fun to see kind of like the whole process from how this drug is made to how you test to see if it is what it is, and then the outcome in trials. So that's a little bit about controlled substance analysis. I hope you guys are having fun with your career project, and I hope y'all consider going into some branch of forensics. Let me know if you have any questions.